So about, I want to say 4 months ago, Joseph Robinette Ding Dong II said in a very public, high-profile interview on mainstream media that the pandemic was over. Take your masks off, everybody. It's all good. Going into winter and the holiday season. The CDC's official guidelines say that they will broadcast when new variants emerge that reach 1% of total prevalence in the COVID-19 total pool. A new variant called XBB.1.5 reached 1% prevalence in mid-November. The CDC covered that information up. Did Biden direct the CDC to cover up the information? I don't know. But the CDC covered up information on XBB.1.5 until after Christmas. Nearly 2 months after their own stated guidelines would have said that they needed to talk about this variant, they then said after not it reached 1%, they made it public after it reached over 40% prevalence in the country. And then Joe Biden went around and banned, or rather, I guess, restricted travel from China. Because you never know what those dirty Chinese might have up their sleeve, right? Right, Trump? I mean, Biden? Whereas in the United States, the CDC covered up new data on a homegrown variant that is now spreading across the world, while the government maintains that China are the ones we need to be afraid of. We need to be afraid of China, Joe Biden says, as the CDC covered up the deadliest, most transmissible variant that we've ever seen that was birthed in the northeastern United States. And so, with that recap, I want to jump in to the dumbest shit for brains article you'll ever see. Republicans demand end to COVID-19 emergency declaration. Biden admin renews emergency declaration 4 months after president declared pandemic is over. Just let it sink in. Joe Biden lied to the American people, and we can only assume he directed the CDC to cover up information. Joe Biden, his mission was not ending COVID. His mission was killing as many people as possible with COVID to the point where it's become normalized. And that mission was accomplished. Joe Biden, when it comes to COVID, is significantly worse than Donald Trump. Honestly, at this point, anyone that maintains that Donald Trump is worse than Biden on COVID, I think, is a fucking moron or a liberal. But hey, what's the difference? So, Joe Biden lied and covered up information on COVID, and now Republicans are pointing to that and saying, hey, you said it was over. House Republicans are calling on Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra to end the COVID-19 public health emergency after the department extended it for the 12th time Wednesday. The group of Republicans led by Representative Troy Nehls, R. Texas, sent a letter to Becerra on Wednesday afternoon demanding the public health emergency declaration be withdrawn or else submitted in writing justification for its continuation by February 10. Quote, the continued extensions of public health emergency calls into question the legality of the expanding powers of the executive branch, blah, 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 stupid garbage. Quote, the continued lack of clarity and mixed guidance from the administration also fails to reassure Americans that they can participate safely in everyday society. Meanwhile, restaurants, bars, sporting arenas, and venues alike have been open and operating at full capacity, yet the administration continues to unsoundly reissue PHE extensions. This is why I say Democrats on COVID are worse than Republicans. Republicans are brazenly like, let's kill everybody, yo. Mass slaughter, I'm in. Democrats love to pretend to trust the science, right? The party of science, right? Right? No, wrong. Democrats are not the party of science. They just have different brands of conspiracy theories. But once again, all this is doing is muddying the waters. The average American is going to see stuff like this, and they're going to be confused. Who do I listen to? The CDC is covering information up. Joe Biden is telling people to take their mask off. And also, the health secretary is saying that we're still in a pandemic. Joe Biden is saying the pandemic's over. So now Republicans seem like the smart guys in the room. And I wonder what kind of disaster that's going to befall upon to America. I don't know what to tell y'all. But bipartisanship has reached a new all-time high. Both parties are genocidal when it comes to COVID. Both parties want you to die. They want you to catch a disease over and over and over again to reduce the quality of your immune system. They want you to be addicted to drugs that they're going to develop and sell. This is all part of their plan. Now, people say, why do you think that they're planning something so evil? Is it possible they're just stupid? Maybe. But if you want me to believe that a high school dropout who just watches medical podcasts is somehow more competent and knowledgeable than the entire White House, the entire executive branch, the entire Democratic Party? Somehow I have more information than they do? Somehow I know things that they don't? I'm sorry, I refuse to believe that. I refuse. I'm sorry, I just plain old refuse to believe that I would have more information than the White House. And if you want me to believe that, you're going to have to convince me in some other way, because I can't figure that out. And so that leaves the only option here, that this is on purpose, that this is with willful intent. And if the action, if the result of these policies and these statements are resulting in millions of more dead motherfuckers, the last time we had millions of dead motherfuckers, we called that a Holocaust. We called that a genocide. The WHO knows how deadly these variants are. The CDC knows how deadly these variants are. They know monoclonal antibodies are in a shortage and also don't work with the new variants. They know that the vaccines are not actually good at stopping transmission because these variants have grown to evolve around the vaccines because certain populations refused to vaccinate themselves and gave these viruses more time to mutate so that they can be vaccine resistant. So what other word applies other than genocide? I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for someone to tell me how this isn't genocide. Millions of dead motherfuckers, and we're just getting started. You know, historically speaking, 30 years, 40 years from now, I don't think that this is going to be called the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we're going to be changing the name of this pandemic era that we're living through at some point. And I think maybe it'll be 10 years, maybe it'll be 20. But I think this period that we have just started living through, I think is going to be a long and dreadful period with mass death, mass sickness, and mass disability. And I think historically speaking, we're just getting started. We're 4 years in and we're just getting started. So I think the COVID-19 pandemic, we need a new name. Maybe the 10-year pandemic, the Great Pandemic, the 20-year pandemic, who knows? But I don't think, once 2034 rolls around, can we really be calling this shit the COVID-19 pandemic still? We're going to have to come up with a new name at some point. The letter cited President Biden's 60 Minutes interview in September 2022 when he declared twice the COVID pandemic was over. Quote, this is Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. This is Joe Biden. The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. If you notice, no one's wearing a mask. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape. Believe me, many people, they tell me, I don't need my mask. I feel great. That's Joe Biden. Now, tell me, what other word besides genocide would apply to willfully, knowledgeably, intentionally telling people to do the opposite of what they need to? Tell me. I'm waiting. If I told someone to eat cyanide and I said the cyanide was good for them and then they died, is that not murder? I didn't force them to eat the cyanide. I didn't jam it down their throat. Is that not murder? Wednesday's letter to the Biden administration is signed by 13 Republicans. Who cares? Quote, today, HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra decided again to extend the COVID-19 public health emergency for another 90 days, which was first implemented by Secretary Azar nearly 3 years ago. As members of Congress, our solemn duty is to hold unelected bureaucrats accountable. I am proud to have led this letter with 12 of my colleagues. Now, again, they're not being held accountable. They're being proven to be hypocrites. Absolutely. But are they being held accountable? No. And once again, I have two options here. Option one, the leopards eating faces party. Yeah, I'm going to steer clear of those guys. And then, option two, the leopards would never eat your face. Everything is fine, party. Which one is worse? The one that advertises its mania on its sleeve? Or the one that lulls you into a false sense of security before pulling the trigger? I don't know. So anyway, good job, Joe Biden, for making Republicans look more reasonable than Democrats. As if Republican QAnon conspiracy networks of anti-vax lunacy needed any more help. Thanks, Joe Biden. Joe Biden will go down in the history books as being the president who convinced America that we all needed to kill each other and ourselves. Now, once again, let me just tell you, Donald Trump, horrible on COVID. There are three main cohorts in America, right? Democrat or liberal, Republican or Nazi, apolitical or independent, right? Those are three demographics that we have. That, voting cohorts, or, they vote by not voting, whatever. Donald Trump, in handling the pandemic, the conservatives, they all followed him into the slaughterhouse. That's one cohort, also the smallest. There are less conservatives than there are liberals and apolitical people, especially combined. Conservatives make up about 18 to 20% of the population, right? Nazis, neo-Nazis. We're talking about KKK members, right? So they were a write-off. We write them off with everything anyway, so it's not like, oh, shit, they're a write-off here. Big surprise, okay? Joe Biden enters office. The Republicans are still crazy. The Klansmen are still not following health proper protocols. In fact, they made it even worse. They went into the anti-vaxxer territory, right? But that was a foregone conclusion. But what did Joe Biden do? He flipped the other two cohorts. The Democrats, the liberals, and the independents, apolitical people, he flipped those two cohorts into behaving in the same way as the Republicans did in 2020. The same people that 3 years ago, resist, hashtag wear a mask, are now having weddings, going into restaurants, going to sporting events that are packed, going to concerts, sending their kids to school. What happened to the resisting? What happened to wearing a mask? So, this is why Donald Trump is better on COVID than Joe Biden. Because Donald Trump is so uniquely divisive that he was able to repel, like magnetically repel against those other two cohorts, the liberals, apolitical, and independents, right? They were like, yeah, Donald Trump's probably lying. Joe Biden comes along, sells the same thing. He just wraps the pill in some cheese, and the dumbass fucking Americans gobble it right up. So that's Joe Biden's great contribution to America, is getting a majority of this country to fall in line with QAnon anti-vax conspiracy freaks. 3 years ago, QAnon was a fringe conspiracy group. Now, QAnon policy, when it comes to vaccines, when it comes to pandemic, when it comes to public health, is popular. 85% of the country believes in the QAnon perspective of COVID. Why do I say that? 85% of the country refused to get the latest vaccine. The vaccine, the bivalent booster shot, which is tailored toward the variants that are spreading now, 85% of the country refused. In what universe is that not QAnon policy? QAnon developed that policy. And now 85% of Americans on COVID believe in QAnon. Thanks, Joe Biden. That's pretty much all I have to say.